Hi, I'm Dale Franks, and welcome back to Episode 2 of QandO TV. Wow, Episode 2. Whoever would have thought that we would have reached this milestone in blogging, podcasting, and video blogging history, and yet here we are, the second episode of QandO TV. I can hardly believe it myself, trust me. But we are here, and it's the holiday time. So first of all, let me say Happy Holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Happy Kwanzaa or Festivus, whatever your holiday happens to be. I hope you're having a good one. And even though in the next week we should probably think a lot less about politics and a lot more about family and friends and being thankful for what we have, we did receive a special Christmas gift this week from the United States Senate. They passed their version of health care reform. It's an interesting version of health care reform in that it reforms precisely nothing for a couple of years. Things go on just as they're going on today. There will be no changes to health care delivery, no changes to insurance. In fact, the only change that will happen is that taxation will increase as we pay for the health care that we're not getting for another couple of years, because you always have to get the money first. That's, I think, probably the motto of the Congress: get the money first. So that's what the Senate is doing. They've passed their bill. Albeit with the use of some judicious bribes, although perhaps bribes is not the word. It is as good a word as any, but legally it's not a bribe. It's the transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal treasury to the states of Louisiana for Senator Mary Landrieu's vote and Nebraska for Ben Nelson's vote. Those transfers have been made, and we'll all be putting up the scratch to ensure that Nebraska and Louisiana get many, many goodies from our pockets. Well, that's great. And speaking of getting goodies from our pockets, one thing about the Senate bill does bother me. It contains a mandate to purchase health insurance. And if you don't purchase health insurance, well, you face fines, perhaps imprisonment. You can purchase it from a private insurer, or you can purchase it from the government, but you will, by God, purchase health insurance. I'm not aware of any portion of the Constitution that allows the government to require you to purchase a good or service as a condition of living in the United States. Well, actually, that's not true. I am aware of the Constitution, and there's nothing in it about that sort of thing at all. It is not the kind of thing you think of when you think of the terms ordered liberty or individual freedom. And that's mainly because the health care reform that they've put out has nothing to do with either of those two rather outmoded ideas. It's all about the compassionate society, not about individual liberty. And so we're now going to be on the hook to pay for health insurance, assuming that it passes the House and the President signs it into law. As to whether or not it will pass the House, well, that's an interesting thing to look at, because in the House, the Democratic side has something called the Progressive Caucus. And the Progressive Caucus are a bunch of wild-eyed leftists who've decided that they're not going to vote for any health care reform that doesn't include a public option. In other words, government provision of health care, a step towards a single-payer system. If they can't have that, then none of us get our health care. Well, our health care reform. Although I'm not sure I want the health care reform that they're talking about. In any event, that lack of a public option in the Senate bill seems to be a poison pill on the House side. Now, this is complicated by the fact that having a public option seems like it might be a poison pill on the Senate side. So whatever it is that the House finally decides to pass is almost certainly going to have some sort of public option in it, unless Nancy Pelosi can crack the whip and rein in the Progressive Caucus in her party. If she can't, then the House and the Senate are going to have to get together and try to figure out how to reconcile what appears to be irreconcilable: the demand for a public option by one of the houses and the absolute rejection of it by the other house. Whether they can cross that T and dot that I remains to be seen, but they'll probably give it the old college try. And of course, whatever comes out has to meet the president's approval, although I suspect at this point that the president would sign anything that could be called health care reform, simply because it's one of the major campaign items that he promised, and if he can't get it, his presidency begins to look even more like a failure than it already does, and that's saying quite a bit. The worrisome thing about all of this, of course, is this slide towards collectivism that we've been on for the last, 50 or 60 years. And despite some fits and starts and some occasional glimpses of sanity, it seems to be a downward spiral that we can't quite escape. We learned how to vote ourselves largesse from the public treasury, as the saying goes, and having learned that, we seem to have no problem voting ourselves more and more of it. There's only one problem. The public treasury is not limitless. First of all, the government has no money of its own. The only money the government has is what it takes from the productive part of society, those of us who go to work in private sector jobs every day. Without that money, well, there's not much money for the Treasury to lay out. Now, sure, the Treasury can do things like borrow lots of money. Unfortunately, we've been borrowing lots and lots of money for the past 30 years or so, and we may have reached the end of our limit in terms of borrowing. The Chinese this week came out and told the United States Treasury, look, there's not enough money in the world to buy all of the bonds that you guys want to sell. Well, if that's true, then we may learn in the not too distant future exactly how far the limits are of voting yourself largesse from the public treasury. And we may have to learn a very difficult lesson about what we do when it's no longer possible for us to give ourselves other people's money. That's a lesson we should have learned a long time ago. Having put it off for so long, I'm afraid it might be a hard lesson to learn indeed. In any event, that's for the future. For now, it's the holiday season. Enjoy yourself. Spend some time with your family. Try to get away from politics for a week or so. Believe me, it'll still be there when you get back. Have a great week. Hope you'll be with us again for another edition of QandO TV when I present it next time. Until then, have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. So long.